They laughed when security grabbed me, called me a fraud, a gold digger, trash. I stood there in a cheap dress, surrounded by diamonds and sneers, humiliated, powerless, or so they thought. What no one knew was that I wasn't just a guest. I was the wife of the man who owned half the people in that room. And when those double doors burst open, and my billionaire husband walked in with a wall of police behind him, you should have seen their faces. This isn't just a story of betrayal and revenge. This is how I burned their perfect little world to the ground. Hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will leave you breathless. Now, let me tell you how a simple misunderstanding at a fancy party changed everything. You know, I never thought my life was anything special. I'm Amara, and I own this tiny bookstore tucked between a coffee shop and a flower market on Maple Street. It's nothing fancy, just shelves packed with stories and a reading corner where sunlight streams through the old windows every morning. That's where I spend most of my days, surrounded by the smell of old pages and fresh coffee from next door. My apartment above the store is just as simple, a cozy one-bedroom with more books than furniture, where I curl up every night with tea and whatever novel has caught my attention. People always ask me if I get lonely living this quiet life, but honestly, I love the peace. There's something beautiful about simplicity, about knowing exactly who you are and what makes you happy. Then there's Julian, my mysterious, wonderful Julian, who travels constantly for work, something in international business, he says. He's gentle in a way that takes your breath away, always bringing me handwritten notes tucked between flower petals or showing up at my door with my favorite lavender coffee. Our dates are simple too. Long walks, quiet dinners, and stolen kisses in bookstore aisles. Perfect, really. I still remember the day Julian first walked into my bookstore. It was raining, and he ducked inside, shaking droplets from his dark hair. Most people browse for a few minutes and leave, but he stayed for hours, running his fingers along book spines like he was searching for something specific. When he finally approached the counter with a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, he smiled and said, "For someone special." I assumed it was for a girlfriend, but then he handed it to me with a note inside. For the woman who makes stories come alive. That's how our romance began. Quietly, beautifully, like something from the very books I sell. Julian would surprise me with picnics in hidden parks where we'd read to each other under ancient oak trees. He'd bring me wildflowers from his travels, each bouquet more thoughtful than the last. Our first kiss happened right outside my shop during a thunderstorm, rain soaking through our clothes as we laughed and held each other close. He proposed on a weekend getaway to a cabin by the lake. No grand gestures, just us and the sunset. The ring was simple, perfect, and when he slipped it on my finger, I knew I'd found my forever. Our wedding was intimate. Just us, two witnesses, and promises that felt more real than any fairy tale. 3 months after our quiet wedding, everything changed with a single piece of mail. The invitation arrived on thick cream-colored paper that felt expensive between my fingers. The annual Metropolitan Charity Gala. It read in elegant script, supporting the Children's Education Foundation. I stared at it, confused. Why would someone like me receive an invitation to such a prestigious event? When I showed Julian that evening, his reaction surprised me. Instead of the confusion I expected, his eyes lit up with excitement. "You should go," he said, kissing my forehead. "It's for a good cause, and you'd look beautiful in anything." But I felt terrified. Me, a simple bookstore owner mingling with society's elite? I'd never owned a gown or attended anything fancier than the local library fundraiser. Julian was traveling again that week, but he insisted on video calling me from every dress shop I visited. "You're overthinking this," he'd say through the screen, watching me model modest cocktail dresses. "Just be yourself. I'll meet you there, I promise." The dress I finally chose was navy blue, simple but elegant, something that wouldn't scream, "I don't belong here." As I hung it in my closet, I had no idea that this single evening would change everything I thought I knew about the man I'd married. The Grand Metropolitan Hotel was like stepping into another world entirely. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors, and everywhere I looked, women glided past in designer gowns that probably cost more than my yearly rent. I clutched my small purse tighter, suddenly aware of how out of place I must look. The invitation trembled slightly in my hand as I approached the registration table. Name? The attendant asked without looking up from her tablet. Amara Rodriguez, I said quietly, still not used to my married name. Her perfectly manicured fingers scrolled through the list, and I held my breath. After what felt like forever, she smiled and handed me a name tag. Welcome to the gala, Mrs. Rodriguez. The cocktail reception is in the main ballroom. Inside, the crowd was even more intimidating. Men in expensive suits discussed business deals, while women in sparkling jewelry air-kissed and complimented each other's outfits. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and tried to blend into the background, checking my phone constantly for any message from Julian. Where was he? He'd promised to meet me here, but as the minutes ticked by, I felt increasingly alone in this sea of strangers who seemed to know exactly where they belonged. I was admiring a silent auction display when I heard someone say my name. Turning around, I found myself face to face with two women who looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. The blonde one, wearing a stunning red gown, was studying me with sharp blue eyes. I'm Anna Blackwood, she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. And this is my dear friend Richard's wife, Catherine. We were just saying how we don't recognize you from our usual circle. I shook her hand, trying to match her confident smile. I'm Amara Rodriguez. I own a bookstore downtown. The look that passed between them was subtle, but unmistakable. Oh, how quaint, Anna said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. A bookstore owner? And you're here because I received an invitation, I replied, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. My husband should be here somewhere. Catherine laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Your husband? And what does he do? Let me guess. He works at the bookstore too? Actually, he travels for business, I said, hating how defensive I sounded. International work? How mysterious, Anna said, exchanging another glance with Catherine. Well, I'm sure he'll turn up eventually. Men can be so unreliable, can't they? What started as uncomfortable small talk quickly escalated into something much worse. Anna and Catherine had gathered a small crowd around us, their voices growing louder and more pointed with each passing minute. I found myself surrounded by curious faces, all watching this spectacle unfold. I'm sorry, but I just have to ask, Anna announced, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Who exactly invited you to this event? Because, darling, this gala is for major donors and their families. The ticket price alone is $15,000 per person. My heart sank. $15,000? There was no way Julian and I could afford that. The crowd was staring now, waiting for my response. I received an invitation, I stammered, pulling the paper from my purse with shaking hands. Anna snatched it from me, examining it like evidence in a trial. This is very strange, she said, showing it to Catherine. The return address is correct, but I don't see your name on the patron list. Maybe there's been a mistake, I said quietly, just wanting to disappear. Oh, there's definitely been a mistake, Anna replied coldly. Security. She waved over two large men in black suits. I believe we have a party crasher here. This woman claims to have an invitation, but she's clearly not supposed to be here. The humiliation was complete as the security guards approached me, their expressions professional but firm. Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us. Standing outside the hotel in the cool evening air, I felt completely shattered. The security guards had been polite but firm, escorting me through the lobby while curious guests watched and whispered. My cheeks still burned with embarrassment as I fumbled for my phone, desperately trying to reach Julian. Each call went straight to voicemail. Julian, please call me back, I whispered into the phone, tears threatening to spill. Something terrible has happened. I'm at the gala, but they think I don't belong here. Where are you? I was about to call a taxi when I heard voices drifting through the hotel's open windows. The ballroom was on the ground floor, and in my humiliated state, I found myself lingering near the windows, catching fragments of conversation from inside. Did you see Julian Rodriguez's donation this year? Someone was saying. $2 million. Absolutely incredible. Rodriguez, another voice replied. Isn't that the tech mogul? The one who owns half the city's real estate. My blood ran cold. Rodriguez, that was my married name now. But Julian had never mentioned being wealthy. He was just Julian, sweet, simple Julian who brought me flowers and wrote me love notes. But as I listened to the conversation continue, describing a billionaire businessman who preferred to stay out of the spotlight, puzzle pieces began clicking into place in my mind. I was still standing there in shock, processing what I'd overheard, when the sound of sirens filled the night air. Black SUVs with tinted windows pulled up to the hotel entrance, followed by 2 police cars. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched the convoy arrive, wondering if this evening could possibly get any worse. Then the first SUV's door opened, and my world tilted completely off its axis. Julian stepped out, but this wasn't the Julian I knew. Gone was the casual demeanor, the gentle smile, the humble clothes. This man wore a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than my car, his hair styled immaculately, his presence commanding immediate attention. Behind him emerged other men in expensive suits, plus the police chief himself, all of them moving with the kind of authority that makes people step aside. But it was Julian's face that made my breath catch. I'd never seen him angry before, not once in all our months together. His jaw was set in a hard line, his eyes blazing with fury as he scanned the hotel entrance. When his gaze found me, standing there, disheveled and tear-stained, something dangerous flickered across his features. Sir, one of the suited men said, approaching him with a phone. The hotel manager is ready to speak with you. Julian's voice, when he spoke, was ice cold and nothing like the gentle tone I was used to. Tell him I'll be right there. And make sure everyone who was involved in this stays exactly where they are. The hotel lobby transformed the moment Julian walked through those doors. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, heads turned, and I watched as recognition dawned on face after face. The man I'd married, the one who'd serenaded me with handwritten notes and wildflowers, commanded the room with a presence I'd never seen before. Where is my wife? His voice carried across the marble floor, reaching every corner of the suddenly silent space. The hotel manager, a thin man in glasses, hurried forward, wringing his hands. Mr. Rodriguez, sir, there seems to have been a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Julian's voice could have cut glass. My wife was thrown out of an event she was personally invited to attend. She was humiliated and embarrassed by your guests. Where exactly is the misunderstanding in that? I watched from the doorway as he strode toward the ballroom, his security team flanking him. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, everyone suddenly desperate to get out of his way. When he reached the ballroom entrance, he paused and turned back toward me. Amara, he said, his voice softer now, but still carrying that commanding edge. Come here, darling. On trembling legs, I walked toward him. The same people who'd whispered and stared as I was escorted out now watched with wide eyes as Julian wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me close against his side. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the room, I'd like you to meet my wife, Amara Rodriguez. The silence in that ballroom was deafening. You could practically hear hearts stopping as the reality of the situation sank in. Anna Blackwood, the woman who'd orchestrated my humiliation, had gone completely pale, her red lipstick standing out starkly against her suddenly white face. I believe, Julian continued, his arm tightening protectively around me, that some of you owe my wife an apology, starting with you, Mrs. Blackwood. Anna's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Mr. Rodriguez. We had no idea. If we had known. Julian's voice was dangerously quiet. That she deserved basic human decency? That throwing someone out of a charity event, an event I personally funded, was wrong? Or did you only realize it was wrong when you discovered who she was married to? The crowd was shifting uncomfortably now, everyone trying to distance themselves from Anna and Catherine. I watched as some of the same people who'd laughed at my expense now looked horrified at their own behavior. Furthermore, Julian continued, pulling out his phone, I'm instructing my legal team to withdraw all future funding from this charity. Clearly, an organization that allows its donors to be treated this way doesn't deserve support. Please, Mr. Rodriguez. The charity director stepped forward, panic in his voice. Surely we can resolve this. Mrs. Blackwood acted independently. Mrs. Blackwood, Julian said coldly, and anyone else who participated in humiliating my wife are no longer welcome at any event I sponsor. Security will escort you out now. As security moved toward Anna and her friends, Julian turned to face me fully. The dangerous edge in his expression melted away, replaced by the gentle concern I knew so well. His hands cupped my face, thumbs brushing away the tears I didn't realize were still falling. I'm so sorry, he whispered, his voice breaking slightly. I'm so sorry I wasn't here to protect you. I'm sorry I let this happen. Julian, I started, but he shook his head. No, let me finish. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. I should have prepared you for this world, for these people. You should never have had to face this alone. Before I could respond, he leaned down and kissed me right there in front of everyone. It was soft and desperate, and full of everything we'd never said out loud. When we broke apart, I could hear cameras clicking, but I didn't care anymore. I love you, he murmured against my forehead. Just you exactly as you are. That's why I kept this from you, because with you, I could just be Julian. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, just the man who loves reading in your bookstore and bringing you flowers. The crowd was still watching, but somehow it felt different now. They weren't seeing a spectacle anymore. They were witnessing something real and beautiful and rare. Dance with me, Julian said, extending his hand. Right here, right now? Let's show them what real love looks like. Later that night, back in my simple apartment above the bookstore, Julian sat on my old couch, still wearing his expensive suit and looking completely out of place, yet somehow perfectly at home. I'd changed into my favorite pajamas, soft cotton with little books printed on them, and made us both tea in my mismatched mugs. I need you to understand something, he said, taking my hands in his. I built this empire from nothing. I grew up poor, wearing secondhand clothes, watching my mother work 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. When I finally made it, when the money started coming in, everything changed. People treated me differently. Women wanted to date my bank account, not me. I squeezed his hands, encouraging him to continue. Then I walked into your bookstore that rainy day, and you looked at me like I was just another customer. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care about anything except whether I'd found a good book. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Just Julian, not Julian Rodriguez, billionaire CEO. But the invitation to the gala, I began. I sent it, he admitted. I wanted to ease you into my world gradually. I thought maybe if you saw that side of my life, I could find the courage to tell you everything. I never imagined they'd treat you like that. I never imagined anyone could be so cruel to someone so innocent and beautiful. I'm not angry, I said softly. I understand why you did it. But no more secrets, okay? I fell in love with Julian, and I can love Julian Rodriguez too. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my bookstore, our bookstore now since Julian insisted on buying the building and expanding it into the space next door. He kept his promise about no more secrets, and slowly, carefully, he's been introducing me to his world. But he's also been becoming part of mine. Most mornings, you'll find him here before the store opens, reading in the corner chair by the window, still bringing me flowers and handwritten notes. The only difference is that now the flowers come from his own greenhouse, and the notes sometimes include plans for our next romantic getaway. Paris last month, the Maldives next week. The charity gala made headlines, of course. Billionaire's wife humiliated at high society event, and the bookstore owner who brought down society's elite. But what they didn't capture in those articles was the real story. A love so pure that it could survive secrets, humiliation, and the glare of public scrutiny. Anna Blackwood and her friends? They're no longer part of the social circle they once ruled. Turns out, when you cross someone with Julian's influence, word spreads quickly. But Julian and I don't talk about them anymore. We're too busy building our life together, one quiet moment at a time. Because that's what real love is, not the grand gestures or the dramatic rescues, though those certainly have their place. Real love is choosing each other every single day, whether you're in a simple bookstore or a marble ballroom, whether the world is watching or it's just the two of you and a good book on a rainy afternoon. And that's how a simple woman's worst nightmare turned into the most romantic revenge story ever. Love always finds a way to protect what matters most. If this story hit you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more real stories of love, justice, and drama. What would you have done in Amara's place? Drop it in the comments. I'm reading them all. And remember, the quiet ones often have the strongest protectors. See you in the next story.